Gordon Hensel, 807 First Street Southeast. Tonight you will discuss a contract with Franklin Advertising for a new lease agreement for a billboard located on city property. Mr. Anderson writes, I have not included the lease agreement with the letter as I do not wish to discuss the details of the lease in a public forum. I'm sure he would prefer to do public business behind closed doors, but there are laws to prevent that. City business is everyone's business. This smells funny to me. Since you are discussing this contract tonight in a public meeting, why isn't the contract and the public copies to inspect on that table? I don't believe that legally you can discuss that contract without a public copy of that contract being on that table. The planning minutes from November 14th, 2011 state conditional use for sign over 2 square feet in size in residential zone district. Vice Chairs Myers called the public hearing to order for the proposed conditional use request by Zion Lutheran Church. Motion by Handler, second by Schulte, to table the conditional use request by Zion Lutheran Church because of an incomplete application. The location proposed sign is in question because, since the variance request was denied. Since this is considered an incomplete application, the clock is stopped and the public hearing will be continued at the next planning meeting. Roach's application has no date, no location of any proposed signs, and listed 2 locations for exit into DeRosier when only one is valid. Why does Roach's application get an exception, but not Zion Lutheran? Why does Roach get city staff help, but not Zion Lutheran? How many people seated in front of me will commit political suicide by voting to approve the Roach application as written tonight? Who amongst you will risk another lawsuit, gambling with taxpayer money? That the application is incomplete as it is missing several items identified in the application form checklist. The application form does list out a number of items that are to be submitted with the application. However, that form also states the city may omit or remove unrelated information and requirements depending on the type of application request. Notice it does not state the city may add anything. In any case, the listing of items on the application form not identified in the city code is being required. Driveways is listed as one of them that is required, so that application is incomplete for sure.
Time's up, thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Hearing none, we'll move on to
I will. I'm Gerald Gutierrez, 595 Smith Avenue. And I'd like to address over the past several meetings with planning and zoning and also with city council. The Roaches have used the FMR, the fair market rent quote and their property over at what we're talking about tonight is the rental would be approximately $1,000, and the FMR for Morrison County as of 2015 is $627. There's quite a disparity between what they're saying, but they're also using the FMR in their discussions. So $1,000 is what they're talking about for their unit, but they're also using the FMR, which is $627 for a 2-bedroom unit. So there's quite a disparity, and I believe that with that type of disparity, there's a difference in clientele, and that would affect our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak?
Yes, I'm Mike Roach. I just wanted to point out a few things. I don't know what this gentleman just recited, but we're a market rate project, not a subsidized, so I don't understand his point. But I wanted to point out that we've been building apartments in Little Falls for since 1985. Pat Spence was mayor at the time, and Rich Carlson started the very week that we started looking for property to build on because of the pent-up demand for rural housing. And we ended up buying some property down south of the Pine Edge, and we built the Maple Island townhomes, or apartments, excuse me. A year and a half later, the city asked us to build down on what was known as Mississippi Flats. We call it Edgewater Terrace now, and we built 37 units down there, which filled up and are full yet this very day with seniors. Subsequent to that, about every 4 to 6 years, based on housing studies generated by the city or our own market demand, which in effect means when our phone starts ringing off the hook and people want housing, it tells us it's time to build more. So that's been going on, and now we are here today we have demand for townhouses. I'm happy to say that we have over 200 people that rent from us now in this town. 90% of them are seniors. And there's more to come, and it's going to continue. We need them today, and if we rented them today, we'd fill them up. And so the criticism, or I should say the opposition that I've heard, doesn't have the merit to rise to the level of against the need for housing. I think that some of you folks in this very room might need a spot to live in the future. We get tired of shoveling snow and such. So I just think it's there. I took offense to some of the things that I've read in your packet with respect to Somalians. I don't know who said it, but they should have been made to leave the building after stuff like that. I won't even address that. We've got a good crowd of people. They have spendable income. The welfare market in this town has been met, but it hasn't been met for retirees and professionals and such that need a spot to live. So that's all I got to say. That's it.
Excuse me, Mike, can I have your address, please?
11453 230th Street in Randall, Minnesota.
Thank you.
Bill Anderson, 14452 Elm Street. You know, I understand when people buy property for investment, that it's being done for a profit, and it all works out. But I think this project out there on Georgia Drive has been blowing up a little bit too much, you know? I think if we follow the law of land, it's 8.8 acres, 8.8 acres, 3/4 acre per duplex is 11 duplexes. And there's .500 left for your splash pad. So I think, you know, why don't we follow the rules, let this thing happen, but just follow the rules. Duplexes, single family dwellings that's what the area is for. 3/4 acre per unit, 8.8 acres, 11 units, .500 extra land. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? Anyone else wish to speak? Hearing none, we'll move on then. Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities. Chris?
And I'm actually not Chris, I'm Elizabeth.
Okay.
Chris unfortunately forgot that we have our conference this week, and so wasn't able to make it, so I'm filling in for him. And I can't remember who spoke, you said, I have my, I have it on PowerPoint, I can do it without, but we've got it. I'll introduce myself while we're getting set up. I'm one of the lobbyists with the coalition. I've actually been with the firm and the coalition for about 8 years. I handle all of the environmental energy lobbying for the firm. I also do annexation work, capital investment work, and then when I'm not working with the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities and some of our individual cities, they're back there. What? I also am the lobbyist for the Greater Minnesota Parks and Trails Association. When my presentation gets up there, you'll see that it has my name and email address. So if you have any questions after the fact, please feel free to contact me or anyone from our organization. One of the things that we always want to be for our members is a resource for you. We're always happy to answer questions regarding any of the things going on at the legislature that affect Greater Minnesota. The main areas that we work on with the coalition are local government aid and property taxes are the biggest thing that we work on, and we'll talk about that. We do a lot of economic development, which includes some work on job training and housing that we've been doing this year. Annexation of land use is an issue that, quite frankly, we wish we didn't have to do as much about, but there always seem to be challenges to annexation laws at the legislature. We do transportation and then the environmental regulation area that I handle. Just to kind of give you a little bit of background, going into the last legislative session, we were very fortunate that we actually hosted the first and one of the few gubernatorial debates prior to the election. Boy, that seems like a long time ago, but it was only a year ago. And we really tried to set the framework forward right then about the need to focus on Greater Minnesota. As you probably know, the 2014 elections resulted in a flip of 10 seats going from DFL to the GOP. But we saw the legislature was divided not only on party, but also regional and ideological divides. There really was almost as much of a division between Greater Minnesota and the metro area, and then even within that metro, or inner city versus outer suburbs, which really had an impact. And the other major factor going into the legislative session was that it was a budget year, which meant they had to get all the budget bills down or the government shuts down. One of our primary goals this year was to try and get local government aid up to the 2002 level, and I'll talk a little bit about how that would have affected Little Falls, trying to get some Greater Minnesota economic development programs done, comprehensive transportation package, and environmental reforms. Going into the legislative session, as you probably know, we started to see a forecast surplus. It was forecasted originally at about $1 billion, went all the way up to $1.8 billion. We have seen and continue to see revenues above projections. Going into that, there was a lot of pressure. Either way, the House GOP wanted to give a lot of it back and proposed tax cuts in a number of different areas, although increases in education and higher ed. There were also cuts to economic development and the environmental areas for facilitating the PCA and DNR. Also significantly, even though it wouldn't have affected you directly because you didn't cut, there was a proposed cut to first-class LGA cities. And we'll talk about why the Coalition of Greater Minnesota Cities came out very strongly in opposition to that. And it's not just because Duluth, one of the affected cities, is also a member. We went into the legislative session, again, trying to get local government aid back up to the 2002 level, which is when we last saw that big hit to LGA. What we really want to do is, our cities either took decreases or remained flat over the last 10 years. Really want you to be able to catch up on infrastructure, capital purchases, and wages. Unfortunately, we didn't see a lot of support for this from the governor. We did see Senator Skoye and some of the other folks did help support a bill to increase it in the Senate, but the House again proposed a tax cut. They did it for a number of reasons, and quite frankly, I don't think any of the reasons really hold water. Originally, they tried to say that LGA was originally from small cities. You'll hear that a lot, but if you actually look back at the history, it was, if you remember that guy named Martin Sabo, who was later a congressman, he was one of the original developers, and Minneapolis and St. Paul were called out specifically. And quite frankly, if you actually spend some time talking to the mayors of those cities, you probably see they face some of the same challenges that you do. When you have older cities, you have not that same tax capacity. And then there's this sort of political reality, because people are like, well, why do you folks care about this? I mean, the reality is that right now, with the population shrinking in Greater Minnesota as compared to the metro area, we're not going to have the same base of support at the legislature. So it's really important that if we want to keep the local government program in place, that we work together with the other cities to make sure that it makes sense for all of Minnesota. So we did work really hard on pushing back on that cut. Unfortunately, what we saw, however, was because of these issues, because of a deadlock over transportation that I'll talk a little bit about too, where they had one side wanting to increase the gas tax, another side wanting to take money from the general fund, basically we ended up with no tax bill. A tax bill is not a budget bill. They were not required to have one, so they didn't have one. LGA, basically you can kind of look and see where the share is. You can also see that Metro versus Greater Minnesota share. Greater Minnesota, has gone up a little bit, so is the Metro, but it just hasn't gotten back to the 2002 levels. This is what it would have been for you folks if we would have been able to get through this proposal. If you look at the red up on the top, that is the CGMC proposal that, again, getting it back to 2002 levels, you would have gone up by about 100,000 for each year. It would have been 200,000 on the second year, and then that would have been an ongoing appropriation. This is something that we think is very important. Again, it is an important tax relief program and allows cities to have, equal, not amenities. I want to say, it's infrastructure. It's a lot of different things, and we think it's really important that we have that equalized across the state. So we're going to continue working on that. One of the things that we spent a lot of time working on, and this really affects a lot of cities, including yours, who have wastewater treatment facilities. When we say an environment program, it's a lot about wastewater, and because that is something that sort of a lot of our cities have, and quite frankly, going forward, is going to be a bigger and bigger expense because of changes to the regulatory environment. We had some challenges. We had and there's a lot more detail about it, we had a lot of different things coming on, but most importantly, a lot of new rules that are either adopted or going to be going into place that would be very expensive for our cities. I think we all acknowledge, you're located right here on the river, clean water is extremely important, but we also need to make sure that our regulations are grounded in good science and that the burden of meeting those is spread fairly, and that we're also able to afford what we're doing. So we had sort of a window of opportunity here with the GOP in the House and the Rural Democrats in the Senate to try and do some regulatory reform that we thought would have made a difference. And that was primarily what I spent my legislative session working on. A couple different things we proposed. One, we asked for independent peer review, basically having outside scientists look at novel or expensive regulations, try to get a cost study done, legislative approval of expensive regulations, and a prohibition on enforcement of unadopted rules. We weren't able to get all of that, but we did get some significant changes that I think will be really helpful for our cities. The commissioner doesn't have to do an independent peer review all the time, but what will happen is that they've got to disclose whether they do that or not. And really why that's important is we think, again, clean water is really important, but we really need to make sure that the science underlying those regulations is done. There's going to be a cost study done so that we can get a better understanding. It's not just, there's a lot of rules, and I don't want to get too dragged down. I get passionate about this stuff, because this is what I lobby on. But there's a lot of rules coming down the pike on nitrogen, phosphorus, chlorate, sulfate, all these different endocrine disruptors, a lot of different things that your wastewater treatment facility is going to have to deal with. And quite frankly, it could be really potentially expensive. And so we're trying to do a cost study so the state, and then looking forward from that, start working with the state to figure out how are we going to pay for that. Because let me tell you, your local government aid isn't going to be enough for that. So we think doing forward planning and looking at that will be really important. There's some additional things, some relief on some standards regarding chloride that would have really hit your city. And then something else that I think will be really important, self-reporting for minor violations. It means that if something goes wrong, very small, hasn't happened before at your wastewater facility, if you correct it within 2 days, you might be able to work with the MPCA. It would give you a chance to sort of basically move forward on that, working with them cooperatively rather than having, your hand slapped at. Basically, rather than being punished strongly the first time if it's a minor violation, working with them cooperatively instead. And I think that's a really good thing for cities as well. Workforce housing. Housing, as you probably know, is an issue throughout Greater Minnesota. Workforce housing is different from affordable housing. Some people get that a little bit confused, but this is really for your middle income residents, your young professionals, or people with your growing companies where you need that middle market housing. And there's a real concern, quite frankly, throughout the state about this. Every city, almost every city we talk to is having this issue. And so we thought we've been working with other groups on trying to get some initiatives on this moving forward. We supported a very large workforce housing plan with tax credits, but when you don't have a tax bill, you're not going to have tax credits. So there was an expansion of a pilot grant program for $5.4 million over the next biennium that will go to Greater Minnesota. What we think is also really important about this grant program is that it's going to go to D, which is the economic development organization rather than the housing group, because it's going to be focused again on that workforce housing, trying to help localities with their growing workforces. There's Senator Sparks from Austin, one of many folks who came down and helped us on this. But we had an expanded program, and we are hoping again, we're going to push forward on, if there's a tax bill next year, trying to get workforce housing tax credits. Trying to get some job training. We have been pushing on this as well. There's been a real desire out of Greater Minnesota for specialized job training to meet the sort of specialized needs, especially with a workforce that's turning over throughout the state. D created a pilot program last year that was largely based on something we came up with, but they didn't give it dedicated funding. We're able to get some funding for it this year at $1.8 million, and we're going to hope that continues to grow because that's turning out to be really beneficial for our employers in Greater Minnesota. Broadband infrastructure. Again, also you probably might be able to appreciate this problem that a lot of folks throughout Greater Minnesota. You know, the governor's task force recommended a couple years ago that we should have, a $200 million program. We got this created last year, funded with $20 million last year, even though there was $40 million in requests. Going into this legislative session, everybody said it was the Greater Minnesota session, so we were pretty sure that this was one program, given the popularity with the press, with residents, with businesses throughout the state, that it would get funded. And first proposal coming out of the House, because they unveiled their bill first, zero money, got it up to $10 million. Senate proposed $17 million, and it came in just under 11. This is something that is going to be, we just don't see this need going away. I think one of the things you heard at the Capitol was some of the folks opposed to it claimed, well, wireless will take care of all of this. If you start looking into the technology, that is decades away. For economic growth in Greater Minnesota, this is something that's really important. We're going to continue to work on. BDPI grant program. I can't remember if Little Falls has used this before. I know that your city administrator, Dan Vought's familiar with it because they used it as former city, but basically provides grants for infrastructure for business development program. This is something we actually helped create and have continued to seek funding. There wasn't a big bonding bill this year, so there wasn't much that went into it. We're going to try to put more into it, but there was some general fund money and a little bonding put in, but we will push for that in the next bonding bill. Annexation, this is one of those issues, again, I really wish we didn't have to deal with, but it just seems that it keeps coming up. There was a pretty, I don't know if you have any orderly annexation agreements here, but there was some language in one of the bills that would have made it really challenging for a number of cities to actually use their orderly annexation agreements. So we were able to basically bottle the bill up by working to not get it heard, because it is a really, really tough issue. Legislators do not like to deal with annexation because it's just something, it's not a lot of agreement on it, but we've been able to stop some of those bills. What didn't happen, you probably know this by now, but really looking for a long-term comprehensive solution. It didn't happen. We've got such difference between where the Senate is at and the House is at in terms of wanting, where they want the money to come from. And I don't know what's going to happen next year, but there is such a strong desire, and there was a lot of criticism about it not happening, that there might be some movement. It wasn't all for lost. We did get corridors of commerce funding and some additional funding for smaller cities. So the local street funding, and then that was kind of the one thing that happened. So some lessons for Greater Minnesota. We always try to reflect back on the session, what happened and what can we take from it. Even though there was a lot of bipartisan support from both the Senate and the House to do things for Greater Minnesota, we didn't see a lot actually happen. There were a few things, but not a lot of the larger priorities happened. Sort of the focus on the tax cuts really crowded out sort of putting money into things like broadband and housing. And if we want to try, we're going to try to come back in 2016 and push on that. We think there'll be a tax bill. We're hoping we can get a lot done in that. But that is really where we look for you folks to help us. Everybody, this is how we're able to achieve success in the legislature. You've got me and you've got Bradley and Chris and Tim up at the legislature working on all these issues. But it's you folks talking to your senators, talking to your legislators, the the folks who can come down and testify. That's really what makes a huge difference. You know, getting the support in the press, that's how we've been able to achieve success in the past and continue to achieve success. It's really being that engaged group working together that we're able to do stuff. What's next? It's a non-budget bill year. We're hoping for a tax bill. There should be a bonding bill, but it doesn't have to happen. We're hoping for it. Transportation funding. One thing we won't be seeing a lot of is probably policy changes. There is such a divide right now between the House and the Senate. I don't see a lot of policy areas where they're going to be getting much done. And keep in mind, everybody is up for election. 2 years ago, only the House was up for election. This year, House and Senate. And boy, when it's an election year, people act a lot differently, and that can be good and that can be bad. But that will have an impact on what we're going to see. And what we're hoping is that we're going to see a delivery on that promise for Greater Minnesota in the upcoming session. Upcoming events, if you decide you need to do something later this week, our conference starts Wednesday in Duluth. We're doing the city visits, obviously, and then our fall conference is in Alexandria in November. If you haven't been to one of those, they're all good events. You know, we bring legislators in to speak. We talk about, you know, working with your legislators. We go in depth on different topics, bringing guest speakers. They're always really good events. So, I want to thank you again. I know you've got a busy evening. I hope I didn't take up too much of your time, but you do have our contact information. Always feel free, either during the session or, you know, during the off session. If you have questions, contact us. And quite frankly, on some of the other issues, you know, the LGA, we know where the need is and we know what needs to get done. On, you know, the environmental issues, some of the other issues, you know, the economic stuff, we get some of our best ideas from our cities, and that's why it's really important to hear from you, not just with questions, but, you know, thoughts you may have on some of the challenges that Greater Minnesota faces. So, thank you, and thank you for your support. Any questions? It's a lot of information, go more in depth in the report I handed out soon.
Next. Golf course. Superintendent position. Greg or Corey or?
Yeah, just to kind of give you guys kind of a heads up, and Laura can chime in here also. The superintendent position, as you know, last Friday was Randy's last working day out at the golf course. So we're kind of looking for some direction from the council. We think we have an idea of kind of where we want to go in terms of interim staff until we get a permanent individual hired for that position. But kind of wanted to discuss some options amongst the council and just try to get a direction on where we want to go. Right now we've got two individuals, one with the clubhouse and the bartenders and pro shop, kind of taking over that aspect of it. And then we also have one slated for the cooks as well as the waitresses. The superintendent position itself, we do have that on the regular agenda on page 22. We did make a slight modification to the job description. It more focuses on the inside aspects of the superintendent as opposed to the outside. You'll notice we moved the mower maintenance to a preferred item as opposed to a required element of the job description. And then on page 23 of your packet, we do have the staffing request for the interim individuals to get some additional compensation for the extra work that they've been doing.
So Greg, we believe we're going to have adequate staff to coordinate what we have getting us through September with what we have there right now.
I would say through August, we do. And at the end of August is when a lot of our staff go back to school, you know, their college kids and such. So we would like to post for the permanent position now, and then we would see, depending on what that individual would like to do, if they would like to give a longer time frame from their current employer here. The hope would be that they would, you know, come in September, and basically finish out the season, and then start with the rebranding of the golf course through this winter, so they can be part of that rebranding process.
I think one of our biggest problems is going to be our cooks because we don't have the availability. Well, two of them go back to their full-time jobs and the other one isn't going to be real available. So come September 1 in the kitchen, we might have some issues and as time goes on, we'll find out more about that and figure that part of it out. But Again, as Greg said, it'd be nice to get that posted and at least get into the process so we can see where we go from there.
Knowing we're gonna have all of those employees going home, and then, we have a resignation too, right? One of the cooks, correct? One of the cooks?
Yep.
Should we see if we can get another cook yet for the rest of the year? Maybe somebody that can go into September?
We can try, I know we posted the cook twice last time, before we got the hires.
Yeah, and that was in the spring
That
before
was
school
spring.
was out. Who knows? I mean, maybe we got somebody that out there that has time. I don't know.
We can certainly try, I mean, yeah, we can certainly try if we can find somebody.
How many of the work staff are going to be leaving? Like going back to college and stuff?
All but one.
Yeah.
So,
Of the inside people, the outside people,
inside,
okay,
yeah.
but the,
but you still need the inside people to run that,
Right,
so. I mean,
right.
So you're going to post for a cook, you should also post for possible September, October, whatever, for replacements, because, you know, most of those college kids hit back August 17th or, you know, right after that, so.
and we're gonna look at the staff. Some of them go to school fairly close to the Little Falls, so, you know, they'll be available on weekends and we're gonna see what events we have and, you know, some of them may be available.
Granted, this year, like 10 tournaments scheduled through August.
In August, yeah, August is our busiest time. We have a couple of, class reunion type things in September, some events in September, but they're on the weekends and.
Do you feel you have enough staff to handle during like the weekdays?
Not during the weekdays, the weekends, come September.
Usually in August, we've got enough staff.
Yeah.
When it comes September, that's when the weekdays look worse. The weekend would be fine, but the weekdays.
Well, isn't that where if we had a superintendent, we'll pick up a lot of that slack if we have
Correct.
hired a new superintendent by then?
Yes.
I don't know that we can rely on somebody coming in as
It doesn't take
superintendent
much time.
because
See, I would.
it's pure speculation. I think the right candidate's gonna be, yeah, I can do it, but after I close out the year at XYZ golf course.
That was my point also, Dave. I don't want us, you know, if we have 4 candidates, I don't want to take the one that would typically finish 4th because they can start early. And because we're looking long-term at a solution for this. And I know we need a quick fix to get us through to that point, but still, some of those guys may not be so, and I don't really know, so maybe there is a gem out there that's.
You know, I know talking with some of the individuals that have reached out to us in terms of, because they heard that Randy was leaving, they've indicated that if it was an interim position, they wouldn't need a permanent job for that. But if it was a permanent, full-time position, that they would, obviously they'd give their notice and such, but it wouldn't necessarily be at the end of the season, they would be able to come mid-season, so to speak. So
That's good.
I'm not as concerned about the mid-season as I originally was.
And I think if we know we're gonna have a person start September 15th versus January 1, that's gonna make a difference for us to know what we need to do the additional staffing.
Right.
You know, because we do have cooks available in the evening and the weekend, again, it's during the daytime. And if we end up not serving meals during the day in September, that's not the end of the world.
As long as we can take care of the event.
It's as long as we can
Yeah.
do the events,
If
right?
we have to look for some sort of catering for a worst case scenario,
Right.
that's always an option.
Well, don't hurt to advertise for all the positions then, if that's what we're in need of.
We will
Take
certainly-
applications, just.
We certainly can, yep, we certainly can. And see what we get, so. So I guess in the interim then, you know, the one thing that we would like to do is we have a person in mind to oversee the pro shop bartenders and another person to oversee the clubhouse and the cooks, the waitresses and stuff. They would have additional duties as far as ordering, scheduling, that kind of stuff. Greg and I are taking on some of the extra, you know, as far as doing payroll bills, those kinds of things. So we're working with them real closely to, you know, make sure things continue to run smoothly out there. We would like to see, you know, appointing those 2 individuals to those, one to each position. And our suggesting that maybe we give them a $2 an hour increase in pay for their additional duties and their additional time they need to spend.
Now we just finish up the season. right?
Just to,
And if
yep,
this thing
finish out the
is
season.
there,
If we get a superintendent that hired, that comes in, you know, September 1, then it would be done when the new superintendent comes in, or no later than December 31st.
How about as far as the person running the grounds, is there any suggested increase, or is that part of the job?
That's part of
duties,
his
or-
job, I mean, that's
Okay.
part of what he's doing already, part of his
Okay.
job duties, so he's really not taking on much for extra duties in there, so, you know, I guess we did not look at that.
Well, I think we're giving somebody extra duties to pretty much run those areas that, I don't think we can ask them to do that and not give them at least a temporary increase. Because we should be saving on the other end for that position, so.
Now, one of the other things we're looking at is as far as the kitchen being open and having a food license, we have to have someone on staff who has a food license. And come the end of August, we won't have anybody, or we don't believe we're gonna have anybody there with a food license. So one of the cooks has the ability to obtain a food license. Her request is if the city would consider paying for the testing part. She'll go through the class part of it herself, you know, on her own time, but is wondering if the city would consider paying for her testing and her license. She's not exactly sure how much that's gonna be, maybe $150. To do that, I mean, I think that would be a good idea, otherwise, you know, because we need somebody with that license.
Who has it now?
Well, Randy does, because he's still on
Okay.
payroll, and then one of the other cooks is a cook at one of the schools.
Okay.
And so she has a license, but when she goes back to school, that license will, and
Can it not do double, because here, where I was going with this is, can she do
Double duty?
super part-time?
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
She
come
can.
in and do the ordering and work one shift and still.
I don't know that she is available or is willing to do that, that's one thing.
Okay.
We haven't had a chance to meet with her and talk with her, but, the other person that has the ability to get it, she's the cook that works during winter time as well. She'll, you know, work on Thursdays for Lions and do some of those Christmas parties and events. So, I mean, it would only make sense if she had it, just because she's been here since 2003. She had a license for a while, ended up letting it go just because she didn't need it. But now, you know, she's willing to go back and get it again.
I think it's more than that, but we have to have it, it's not optional. So it's under 50, it's 300. We got to do it. So I would say, you know, we can't take official action on that, but
Right.
I think management would just realize we have to have something there, so.
Anybody else got any questions or concerns?
So, when we act on this on the agenda, I think the reading, as Greg said, so, Austin Bjorgi would be the pro shop, would be the person that would oversee the pro shop, is who we would recommend, and then Julie Sledham would be the cook. So for the minutes, we'll need to have their names and that we would approve that. And the other question that came up is, you know, we've talked about the rebranding and out at the golf course, you know, doing some name changes and that kind of thing. And hopefully when we get a person on full-time that can come in and kind of look at some of those things. But one idea that was brought up is, do we want to have a suggestion box or something out at the golf course, you know, for rebranding or renaming, you know, ideas for renaming the golf course. And since, you know, league and all that kind of stuff is going to be done pretty much by the end of August, and there'll be, you know, some people in there September, October, hopefully November, what, but, you know, to have a suggestion box out there, just for people, and maybe specifically say that, we're thinking of renaming the golf course, and do you have any suggestions or ideas or whatever, and, a couple people can be sitting out there visiting and say, oh yeah, this sounds like a good thing.
And can we make it available where public can go there?
Oh,
Since it's
sure.
taxpayer dollars, I
Yep.
think we need to let them
Yep,
know that anybody can
absolutely.
name it, and I would suggest they
Yep.
put their name and address on it or something, because
Yep.
otherwise, we're gonna get some comments.
Yeah. No, that's fine. If anybody has ideas, they certainly can, send them to us or email them in or whatever. But yeah, then we'll add a suggestion box, so.
So we had on the rebranding portion of it? For now?
So great.
Franklin City sign,
Steve is here.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Steve Anderson. I live at 407 14th Street, North Coast Spring, Minnesota. I'm here as a representative of Franklin Outdoor Advertising. And if you recall, some of you maybe weren't here last year, I attended a meeting to discuss city-owned property where we have a billboard on. That lease, the city acquired the lease when they bought the property, and that lease is coming up for expiration. So we'd like to renew that opportunity with you folks, and we talked about several different items on the compensation part of it, and what we could offer you. And so I had several discussions with Dan and Lori on what's out there, what we can do, and what you may be interested in. And so we've had the lease has been forwarded to the staff, and I'm sure the attorney can look that over. But we'd like to renew the lease for say 10 years and move forward, either pay in a cash monetary value, but conversations we've had, it appeared that the advertising might be a good way to do it, and I think you get a lot more value out of that. And so I guess we're here to take on any questions, or I've had a couple proposals there in front of you, a couple different sign ideas, and I think it's a good opportunity for you to take advantage of some advertising or income. And I don't know if the pictures came through, but we threw some ideas together, and the ones I saw were not through color, so okay. Basically, there's a space available type program we do with a lot of landowners that are also business owners, and it's a really good way. The sign gets moved around occasionally in different spots, and it looks like appears you have multiple signs out there. We move it according to how, if we have someone a client who comes in and buys that particular spot, we'll bounce you to a different spot. In our conversations, Dan indicated that all the town is where the council would like to go. We'd be happy to do that, except it's kind of on a space available basis. South-facing signs all the town are kind of a premium, and we're not willing to give one of those up on a permanent basis, but we give you a credit from our lease towards one of those spots. Or I guess my suggestion is the space available thing is a really good thing. There's no out-of-pocket expense on your end, and that sign will bounce around. And you get the same traffic patterns when it's on the north side of the sign and the south side of the sign. And I think for your purposes, that'd be really good. You don't need a point of purchase sign south of town. All those people are going north or coming back south with golf clubs in their clubs or kids in their car wanting to go somewhere. So that's been a really good program for our folks. I also have another suggestion in there. We'll have you firm up a sign for you, a bigger sign. Use it to whatever way you want to for whatever purposes. But there's some expense on that on our end, and we'd ask that you pay production for the advertising. The space would be pro bono, I guess. So with that, or there's a straight out cash payment too. So with that, I think you have an asset sitting there on that the property. have to answer any questions and look for some direction from the council, and I'd like to work with you on it.
Anybody got any questions for him?
I have a question for city attorney. Now, I know that the other signs along there are grandfathered in. Is there a reason that ours can't be grandfathered in to the point to where is it any sort of a violation of our sign ordinance?
No, this is a legal non-conformity, so it's grandfathered in, it's been there since, what did we talk about, 20-some years?
And I know for sure since the 80s.
So, I mean, this is a legal non-conformity, doesn't mean, you know, you need to sign up for one of these options. It's a lease termination, so you can choose to say, great, fine, we're done, we're not gonna renew the lease. You don't have to renew the lease, but you can choose to, and no, it's not gonna be a violation.
Well, and you know, I've said in the past that we've taken advantage of, I know the golf courses have a sign, I believe the zoo has, and rather than pay for these, if we can make this trade, I love the one with the golf course and the zoo on the same sign. You get double bang for a buck, and to be able to trade that, and like you said, the value is probably more doing that than taking the cash, in lieu of cash. And, you know, these are sites, we can continue to do city sites that are an advantage to us to have them out there advertising. I know that Convention and Visitors Bureau has a rather large budget for advertising alone, and whether it's flyers or whatever, but they have highway signage. I love the idea of that double signage. And then I believe there was something I read about possibly after 2 years review it and see if you want to change an option or whatever, but
Yeah.
I think there's great value to our community to advertise our assets. And that's what we do.
That sign, that's a large sign, and you can split those up and still get good visibility and readability of the sign. You know what, billboards, you have to make them simple so that people can read them. And that's just a bigger sign that we can put together and we can switch the ads on. Because we talked about, Dan's concern was we advertise for the golf course that it's not open in the winter. So trying to address that, maybe give you some options with that, so.
Well, if we have a new name and we rebrand and we get that out there and add a little bit of excitement, it's never too soon to advertise it.
Are we talking about one specific location for the lease though, and then the rest of these are just examples of what could be done?
Yeah, the lease is, there's a sign structure on city-owned property.
Where is that?
Okay, Falls, Fuel Falls, yeah.
Was it a salt shed that's out there?
The sand salt shed is the second one south of the salt sand shed. But our advertising would not go on that sign. Our advertising would go south of,
Well, it could, but.
well, it could, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's an option.
Yeah.
See, we got several people selling all these signs, and we got signs on all sides of the city, and so they come and go, and they're available, not available on a monthly basis, so but we always have signs that are available, you know, at all times.
Just come along with the double connection?
No, we got that back in.
Well, here's an aerial photo.
Well, I know where it is, I just needed somebody to tell me where we were talking about.
So there's a couple options, and I think it's a good opportunity to get something out there. One of the concerns I had is, you know, who would we talk to about getting artwork done and approved, and I guess signing the documents and so forth.
We got any other questions?
Maybe it's our current one in.
Leave October.
And some direction from the council then, if you're interested in pursuing this, do you want to go with the do you want to keep the lease and then cash payment or the advertising, in which direction, so that we can put a contract together to come back to the council for action?
I would think that the the one moving around to different locations, doesn't cost us much. Getting the city out there with the golf course or the zoo or Arts and Crafts Festival or whatever. Well, and if you just need to know if we're interested in continuing the lease and then looking at these packages, you know, you're not looking for a specific package, because we can't vote on it, of course, right now. We'll have to do that in regular session, and that's not on tonight's agenda.
Right.
So, I would be in favor of us looking at some sort of trade, continue with the lease and work something out in the signage area, like I stated earlier. That's my personal opinion.
Anybody else?
Thank you very much.
Tank removal, former Clark Station.
Over at the Clark Station, we're getting to a point where we're ready to remove the tanks. We received pricing from a couple of contractors, as well as the environmental portion of it. Whenever you remove tanks from the ground, we have to have an environmental person on site to make sure there's no contamination with the tanks and so on and so forth. This is included on page 25 of your agenda tonight. The tank removal itself and disposal is $81.65, and the environmental and testing portion of it is $3,525. So tonight we'd be looking for approval at the council meeting to remove those tanks so that we can get the site cleaned up, or at least identify if there's any petroleum spill at that location so we can get it cleaned up and back on the tax rolls.
Is that what the testing is for, to see if there's been any leaks or
Yep.
any?
Once they pull the tanks, then they take some tests below the tank to see if there's any petroleum that may have leaked out.
So when they pull it and do those tests, they test it on site then, or they bury it and dig it back up?
Nope, they test it right as they pull the tanks out. You have to have them, you have to have the environmental person there at the same time you pull those tanks.
And then if there's minimal amount of pollutants in the area, then they can clean it up right away as long as you have the inspector on site. And if there's over whatever the threshold is, then they'll just seal up the site, and then we can apply for some grant funding. And even if there is a minimal amount of pollutants in the area, Ken would still assist, or Landmark would still assist us with applying for grants to do the cleanup and disposal of the stuff, whatever the ground, whatever we have to do. So that's why that would be, it's beneficial to have them here.
It looks so much better with that building, and even with the dirt piles there. I never thought I'd say dirt piles were attractive, but compared to the building, I think they're beautiful.
We're preparing for the hole that the tanks are gonna leak, so we've got the dirt piles in now.
Any questions for him on that?
Next time.
On the well sealing, former IGA building.
So the IGA building, several years ago, we had put in some test wells at the IGA building to test for dry cleaning solvents. The wells then, after we did the testing and complied with all the PCA regulations at that point in time, the test wells were left intact. Just if we had to do something with them in the future. Well, the MPCA now has instituted some regulations where if those wells are still open, we actually have to pay a fee to the MPCA to have those open wells, which is $450 a year for the, I think we have 9 wells there. So it's $450. We talked about a while ago, and we're bringing this back to the council again. It just makes sense to seal those wells. We have no need for them. It doesn't make any sense to have them. We had talked to Ken a while ago about giving us a price to go ahead and clean up or seal those wells and take care of them. And since we're asking him now about the Clark Station, we thought, well, this would be a good time to take care of those wells at the IGA as well and get done with them. So it just timing-wise makes good sense. And in the end, it'll save us some money by not having to pay the MPCA.
I will add that the site has been closed by the MPCA. They didn't find any contaminants over there, so there's no additional need to keep those wells open unless you want to keep paying $450 a year.
So how do those end up to be city wells?
Because we owned the property at the time, we had purchased the property, we bought it and then owned it for a period of time and then, sold it to Ritters.
The wells didn't go along with the sale of the property.
We're still listed as the owner.
I'm glad you asked, because I was gonna ask for a quick history lesson on that one, I was thinking the same thing. Oh,
You got any other questions on that one? Wastewater treatment facility report proposal?
This is included on page 24 of your regular agenda, but as you heard Elizabeth speak this evening, there's a number of additional requirements, wastewater requirements that are coming down the pipe as time goes on. We have received kind of a draft permit from the MPCA, which do indicate and lay out some of the requirements that we will have in our next permit for our wastewater treatment plant. To give you a quick history, I don't want to stand in your way of a fire truck here. To give you a quick history on the wastewater plant, it was originally constructed in 1958. And then 1985, we had some upgrades to the plant, and most of the plant, except for the piping underground, was upgraded. And then in 2002, we added some additional upgrades, which changed it from a Class B to a Class A sludge, essentially on a Class A sludge. What you do is you take the biosolids and you heat it up. That kills a lot of the pathogens and organisms in there. But as you can imagine, as you heat it up, that has a lot of energy in order to make that happen. So we've seen our operation costs increase due to that upgrade back in 2002. So some of the requirements that the MPCA is looking at having us do, as Elizabeth mentioned, is phosphorus removal for this particular location here. That can be expensive. We're looking at options to kind of reduce our expense and exposure to that. And so part of this proposal that you have in front of you tonight is looking at all the options that we would have available to meet the current permit, but still have it in the best interest of the city. One of the requirements of that draft permit that we saw from the MPCA is to have what's called a facility plan. That basically says, this is what we're going to be doing as a community moving forward with this particular plant. It could be upgrades at the current location, it could be upgrades at a new location, or it could be something entirely different. And so the proposal that we have from SEH basically looks at all of the different options that would be available for Little Falls in treating our wastewater and trying to find the best route for us, knowing some of the requirements that are coming down the line in terms of treatment.
Any questions? Looks like it's gonna take a while to put together.
It takes about a year to put it together. It's an extensive process that they go through, and you know the permit requires us to have it by March 1st, 2017. And then there's kind of an implementation schedule, because just because you have the facility plan, there's steps in there in terms of design until you actually have to get the plant operational, the upgrade operational. And so likely, even though we have our permit in 2016, likely we won't have that upgrade requirement until 2021 or 2022. But the facility plan kind of makes that step, and so you're working towards that. So that when that next permit comes around and says these are your limits, you already have that in place in 2021 when it needs to be in place. So it does take quite a while in order to get that completed.
Any questions for Greg?
I do have one other item if there's nothing else in this particular.
I just see you got SEH or the proposal from them. Did we go out for other proposals, or they're only around a dozen, or?
No, we didn't go for proposals. What I did with that particular one, as you know, I used to work at SEH. I kind of cherry picked who I felt was comfortable doing that the most efficient as well as the most responsible for our wastewater treatment.
And we do have SEH hired to do capital improvement plans, right? They're for the water and the waste. We had them do capital.
What have they done a lot of work for us on
Yeah,
that?
for both.
Both of them, of course.
Well, we're talking $56,500. I'm just asking my question, is it, it's a lot of money. Shouldn't that be something that's somewhat competitive?
That's normal in terms of the price range for that amount of work. That's about where they come in at in terms of price.
How hard is it to, not that I'm disputing what you're saying.
Yep.
How hard is it to get some evidence of that? City XYZ did it with company X. I mean,
I can get stuff you'd like.
I just want to be smart about it. I mean, it's a big chunk of money here with no compete. I mean, it's not Halliburton money, but it's something.
Anybody else? What else we have under the other?
Under the other, just a FYI, out at the waste plant, we will be having some bar screen repair at one of our lift stations. It's gonna be about $40,000. We did budget for that this year, but you'll see that coming through in terms of improvements out there.
Anybody else got anything? No?
Mr. President, may I make a suggestion as long as you're about to close and you have some time? I was actually going to talk about this in my public forum, but I thought it was more important to talk about the other things. The podium does not allow a person who is fully handicapped in a wheelchair to address you. They'd have to sit behind there or alongside of it. And if they had information and didn't have any way to, there's no table there or anything that they could reach. And so I'd like this council to consider finding a table a little bit larger than the one you've given to Gabby here, so a wheelchair could be pulled up and sort of parked underneath there and have some type of amplification that, I don't know if that can be moved or not, but we should be accommodating everyone in this city, including the fully disabled. So I'd like to make that suggestion for in the future. Thank you.
It does say on the bottom of our report that if you need any type of accommodation to notify us, and we'd be happy to accommodate them.
Yeah, but if you don't have something set up ahead of time and someone comes here unannounced, how would you ever accommodate that without having something in place?
Adjourn to parking lot?
Well, sure, that doesn't
You know?